Hello, and welcome back to the Seeing Better podcast. I am here with you on Saturday night, and I've had a full day of tennis, working out. I went to Trader Joe's. I got lunch with a friend. I cleaned up my apartment, and I wanted to sit down and record an episode on my experience posting a podcast a day for a full week. And I've learned a couple of things along this journey over the past week, and I wanted to share them with you. So it had started last week when I had an extra day on the weekend because it was President's Day, and I had some extra time on my hands. So I decided to go ahead and commit to posting a podcast every day this week. So, in other words, it's podcast week. And I was really inspired to do it. And here's the story. I came out guns blazing. I think I recorded 4 podcasts on Sunday, and I was super inspired, and it was just flowing out of me, and I couldn't see a way out of it, like in a very good way, that I just wanted to continue to record, and I felt really lit up. I took a couple days off, and the motivation was dwindling. And then, as I had mentioned in my previous episode, the one where I explained how I'm building resilience in real time, I didn't think I wanted to record that night because I was having a tougher day than normal, but evidently I was able to go deeper and be more vulnerable in that episode than I have thus far. And by doing that, I do feel very proud of myself. And that's been a key mission of this podcast is not only for me to open up, but be more vulnerable, be more real with myself and with others, but also to hopefully show the listeners that they can do the same. That's been a journey that I've been on my entire life and will probably always be the case. But there's nothing more inspiring and confident building than doing just that, and to be your whole authentic worthy self and not have to apologize for it or make adjustments for other people. So I recorded that podcast, and it was a big release and a relief in a good way. While I wasn't in the best mood, I wanted to make sure that the message was honest, but also had a purposeful mission within it. I didn't want to just vent or complain over the mic because I can do that on my own time. And I also, even in my own time, don't want to be doing that too much, if at all. Although complaining seems to be the human condition. So I probably will get to 100% no complaints. But whenever I'm recording, I really do have the mission to make it a positive and uplifting message. And that's not to be overly optimistic, but rather to give you a boost in your day, because there are moments in our days that try to drag us down and get us out of alignment. But this is not going to be on this podcast. By doing that on Wednesday, I ultimately was able to break through something that may have been a block for me. And I had a re-inspiration, and I didn't record too many after that, I don't think. But at least I felt like I had moved through something. So by doing this podcast week, I've been able to overcome a block that I may have had that I didn't know was there. The first time that I had decided I actually wanted to go ahead and record a podcast was a big moment for me. I think that was probably the moment, the key domino, if you've read The One Thing, the lead domino. But I think posting every day in a whole week feels like a lot. And that's exactly why I wanted to challenge myself to do that. I've been listening to this guy on YouTube, and you should definitely check him out because he has a very interesting mission. His name's Sahil Bloom, and I'll leave his information in the show notes. But he basically records a YouTube episode every day, and he's done it for 50 days so far in the ice bath. So he's in there for like 8 to 10 minutes in the ice bath discussing different topics, and it's really interesting and obviously very inspiring because if you've ever done an ice bath before, you know how cold it gets. So that's been part of the inspiration and part of overcoming the fear of being too much talking into a void, which it very well may be, and that's okay, but that's also not why I'm here recording. It's to actually spread the message, to share how I've progressed throughout different situations and hopefully inspire others. So, all in all, the podcast week has been a success. But what I will say is that it doesn't mean that every day is necessarily the perfect day right for podcasting. I had different emotions throughout this week. I don't know if it's because it's a full moon or what, but things happen. And I don't know if podcasting on a daily basis is necessarily completely accessible to everyone, but I am inspired to do more podcasting. And the way I feel about growing the podcast is that I'm definitely in the awareness phase right now. So, a little marketing tactics for you. We have 3 key steps in the marketing funnel, or generally what consists of a marketing funnel, which is awareness. And that's just getting the message out there and getting seen and seeing better, I guess you could say. Consideration. So, audience members, targeted audiences that are considering your proposition, who may not be part of your community just yet, but who are evaluating their different options. So in this case, maybe you've listened to some other podcasts that you really like and you may be interested in trying more, but you're not quite sold. But you're in the consideration phase. And then the conversion phase is where you're a loyal consumer. You listen to the podcast every week, you spread the message, and then ultimately you participate in whatever that community has to offer. And right now I'm deep in the awareness phase. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do more in this case in terms of spreading the message of who I am, what I stand for, and what the podcast will entail moving forward. And I will say that it was a success for the most part. And I also need to continue to share that success in order to grow and to expand on this message. So that's going to be my duty for the next couple of weeks, is deciding how I want to do that, and also sharing the insights with you once I am aware of them. The reason why I really started this podcast was, yes, to overcome that block of being afraid of what other people might be thinking, but also more as an experiment for myself as well. I'm a product marketer by trade, and I love my job and I love marketing, but I wanted to work with a new medium. Generally, I've worked with physical product, and my mission was to try something new, which was creating content. And it's been such a fun journey so far. And the podcast has been a great way to dip my toes in that field. But I also want to try different modalities of getting this message out there and getting the word out there. And that could look a couple of different ways, but it could be going on other people's podcasts or having people on my podcast swapping, which is the number one way to grow a podcast. Also, having a regular newsletter that goes out. And I currently have one for new subscribers, but I do want a weekly newsletter to be able to go out alongside the podcast and have a very clear mission of the content journey and what it looks like. So perhaps one month is all about health topics, and then the other month are about healthy habits that I've acquired. Whatever the case may be, I do want there to be a 360 journey throughout this entire podcast medium and nucleus, because for a lot of brands, personal brands and physical brands these days, the podcast medium is really the nucleus of where they share the message and content market from. So that'll be my next mission, is to get up to speed with whatever that routine looks like. Having a full-time job, I don't have a ton of extra time, but I do want to have some sort of system set up so that I can record the podcast, decide what I'm going to speak on, and then also find a efficient way of setting up those systems. And thus far, I've been able to at least publish the episodes, but moving forward, I want to amplify the message and give you more to work with. Also, more physical and visual items as well, because podcasting is great, but it's only for the ears for the most part. So more content, that means physical, digital, video related, all the things, which is very, very exciting. And for me, it's been such a pleasure because it's not something I get to do every day, and it's a new territory that I get to explore. So, what I'll say about the podcast week in a nutshell is that I do still stand by my same mission and thesis of the Seeing Better podcast, which is to create better and not more. So while I did do the most this week, it was for a purpose and it was also to try it out. And I did receive more engagement than normal. So I will say, if it's something that you're interested in your field or your business, which is like committing to something for a certain amount of time and seeing what that does to your business, I think it's interesting. And we have to test and learn. That's going to be how we're able to tailor our business for specific audiences. But I will say that with content in particular, if you have a plus piece of content, you can boost it, and whatever that looks like to you. So maybe that actually means putting it on paid social or putting it on multiple platforms and splicing it in different ways. You can amplify that one piece of content and make the most out of it. And what that can look like is a snippet of a testimonial piece of content that was really incredible and received a lot of engagement from your community, or even writing a book one day, where then you can really build out your portfolio from there. The amount of content that exists in the world is incredible, but not everyone can actually consume all of it. So you're going to be looking for different ways to target different people through those styles of content. So while there's this misinformation that everyone should be on TikTok, and while I do think that's a great way to be able to share your message, you also have to know who you're speaking to there, which, as we know, it generally tends to skew younger, people who want short, snackable content, and who like things that are a little left of center. They're not your everyday folks that are just looking for that clean and polished look like on Instagram. So this way you can actually ensure that the message is getting to the right people at the right time on different platforms. So hopefully at one point I'll maybe make my way over to TikTok, but not quite sure yet. I'm thinking of maybe doing my thoughts on different branding, rebranding elements of different brands, or content ideas for other brands. I don't know. We'll see. I'm playing around with different ideas. I'm not quite there yet. And hopefully I'll be inspired by something. But for now, the podcast is where I shall live. And I've been really enjoying it. And if you're listening to this, thank you for listening. It means a lot to me. And regardless of how many people are out there, I still find it to be something that I'm very lit up by. So I will continue to do it and continue to put a lot of thought and effort into it, because I think that's where I've come to terms with I am most passionate about, which is creating a really, really, really strong piece of content via the podcast and expanding out from there. So one of the podcasts that I was really inspired by was my episode most recently on my fitness journey, which was from overexercise to optimal movement. And I had so much to say there. I was actually running out of time. So that would be one of those things that I'd be looking into to expand upon. If you have any other podcast topics that you'd like me to expand upon, please email the podcast, and that is at seeingbetterpod@gmail.com. And I can go ahead and create a piece of content around that. I'd be happy to. It's definitely going to be a two-way street here. It's not just me talking into a mic for no good reason. I am really aiming to add value to your life and what your interests are and what you're looking to find an answer to. And hopefully I can at least give my perspective on that. I always have the intention to add value. I'm not looking just for the validation. I'm lucky that I've been able to do a lot of work around that and not have to seek validation from outside sources. I really get that from my own spiritual practices, which has been really great. So I can say exactly what I want on this podcast and not have to think about what others might think of it in the best way possible, really. So would I do a podcast week again? Yes, I would. I don't think it's for every week. Absolutely not. But if I'm looking specifically to push a message or maybe even a theme out there, I think there's a way to do it. If it were a series, I think that could also work. If I was going to do a series on 7 steps to optimal wellness or something like that, maybe I could do a podcast every day. But I also don't think it's necessary. I don't think it's about creating the most podcasts because, well, Joe Rogan's a different example because I do think he podcasts a lot, multiple times a week, if I'm not mistaken. I usually don't listen to him, but I know he podcasts a lot. But there are a lot of other great podcasts that don't podcast every day, but maybe they have two and a half, the half being a smaller, shorter episode that go out every week, and they just stay really, really consistent. I think one of the keys to success in really any area is staying in the game. The longer you're in the game, the better you can build your skill set and build upon what you already know. So that's going to be my new goal moving forward, which is not to do more, but just better and be very consistent in doing that. So that's what I learned from the 7 days of podcasting. And I thought I would give an update for anyone that was curious on what happened the other day. So when I recorded my podcast on resiliency, I was just right before I was supposed to leave to go to my Toastmasters meeting on Wednesday. And like I said, I was feeling like I wanted to stay home, but got a wave of inspiration after I recorded the podcast. And I'm sure you would not expect where the story went after that. So I made my way over to the meeting. Everything went great. I was the Toastmaster of the evening, so I was sharing the topic with everyone, which was resilience, as you know from that episode, and felt great, as I always do, leaving the meeting. And it ended around 9 p.m. I also had to go stop by Target, so I ended up coming home around 9:30ish, which for me is much later than I would have liked. I'm usually an in bed by 9:30 kind of gal, so getting into bed at like 10, maybe 10:30 is a little bit later than I would have liked, but it will do. So when I got home, I thought it would be like any other night after I go to Toastmasters, but I was met with something entirely different. And this is a bit of a funny story. I can laugh at it now, but I was not thrilled at the time. So I came back to my apartment and opened the door and noticed that the bathroom had flooded. And I was like, oh my God. And yes, it was flooded, like on the floor there was water, but I'm not going to go into it because it's entirely too graphic, but there was stuff coming through the shower and it was absolutely disgusting. It was the last thing that I was hoping to happen that evening, but I am very proud of how I handled myself because I feel like if that would have happened a couple of years ago, I would have just had a chip in my shoulder and been upset about it and frustrated, which I'm not going to lie, I did have a little bit of that, but I accepted the situation pretty much head on. I was like, okay, right. So I texted my landlord, who thank goodness was still awake at the time. It's probably like 10:15 at this point. And she texted the plumber who came over at like 10:30-ish, and he has a full mask on. He has a giant pump thing that I don't even know what it was. I wasn't looking. And I let him in and he just went to town. So I decided to watch a movie. And I watched the movie The Terminal with Tom Hanks, which is such an interesting movie. And I've never really heard anyone talk about it, but I highly recommend it. It was super heartwarming and had a nice journey to it. It's about this man who basically tries to enter the United States, and his home country goes to war when he's trying to enter. And Stanley Tucci, who plays the I don't know, TSA officer or whatever they're called, customs agent, basically gives him a hard time, and he's kind of like a funny character, and tells him that he has to basically stay in the terminal until his country resolves their conflict or something along those lines, because he's basically a citizen of nowhere is what they say. And he knows no English. He has no American dollars on him. His passport has been taken away from him. and he's basically left helpless. The idea being that if he just leaves, as in he just walks out the door, that he will then no longer be the customs agent's problem. So it'll be somebody else's problem, but not theirs. And they expect him to just walk out the door, but lo and behold, that is not what happens at all. So I'll leave the rest to you, but very good movie, actually. I really quite liked it. So if you are a member, I think it was on Paramount Plus, it's on there, but I see it on a lot of the streaming, so I'm sure it's out there. But very good episode, or very good movie, rather. And so I was watching the movie, and the plumber has just been going to town. I hear a bunch of noises, but I'm just immersed in the movie and trying not to think about that because it really was not something I could control. And he calls on the walkie-talkie his, I don't know, his coworker, and I want to say the coworker was like somewhere else in the building, like they were communicating with each other. And he was like, "Dude, I'm going to need a longer extension cord." And I was like, "I don't know what that means. Why does he need one?" And so he goes and he gets the extension cord because I let him out, and I happened to walk by, and what I saw was absolutely disgusting and foul and was something I would have rather unseen. But he literally took the toilet off of the pedestal and was like redecorating the whole thing. It was insane. So right then and there, I continued to stay along my journey. I couldn't change it. There was nothing I could do about it. It was also getting very late, and I didn't want to stay up that late, but alas, it was what I had to do. So I watched the movie, I finished the movie, and it's like 1:15 at this point. And he was such a saint and helped clean the majority of it, but he was like, you really need to like do a deeper clean here because it was everywhere. So I was like, okay. And once he leaves, I get on my rubber gloves and get out what's called the pink stuff. If you're on TikTok, you probably know about it, but it's like cleaning solution. And I get like all the cleaning supplies I have in my apartment and I just go to town. I'm scrubbing the bathroom. I'm cleaning the shower, like the whole thing. I've vac mopped about 5 times and I was just going to town like it was a hazmat situation, which it really was. So I wasn't being over dramatic. And once I had cleaned it thoroughly, I decided, okay, I'm going to have to take a shower, unfortunately, but I'm going to take a shower and I'm going to go to bed. So I go to bed around 2, and the next day, my landlord has kindly had someone bring over like some fans and a commercial dehumidifier, which helped clean it up. And, anyways, that's the story. But all to say that this was happening during the podcast week and during a week when I was actually having a little bit of a harder time than normal. And I'm just very proud of myself at how I was able to react to that and not explode and not put that on someone else. I actually thought it was funny. Like while I was washing, like I put on the gloves and was washing everything, I was actually laughing. Like it was funny. And I just think that's growth because there would have been so many other times where I would have just been in a bad mood and made it someone else's problem, but not this time. And I definitely have the podcast help reinforce that because I had such a great message earlier in the evening about resilience. And then come to find out, I have a giant mess and a giant flood in my apartment. So, be careful what you wish for there. But I would say it was a successful week, not a traditional week, but we can't always expect what's going to be thrown at us. And I'm excited to publish this podcast for the final installment of Podcast Week, or at least the first one. Who knows what'll happen in the future. I'll be back to my normal recording schedule on Sunday, so we'll record one tomorrow as well. And we'll see what I'm going to talk about. I have no idea. Honestly, sometimes it's very much situational. I'll sit down and want to talk about one thing, and then I change my mind, and then I talk about something entirely different. And that's how the cookie crumbles. So again, thank you so much for listening. Very happy to be sharing Podcast Week and all it has entailed, this crazy wild ride, but that's just what makes it fun. So Thank you all. If you enjoy this podcast, please like and subscribe and share it with somebody that you think would be interested in it. Maybe not this episode because that might be a little weird, but one of the other ones because this got a little personal. And I will see you on the next one. Until then, I hope you'll be seeing better. Thank you. Bye.